New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And welcome now to the other side of the news, the good news here on the New Thought Media Network. I am Reverend Michael Mangus, and each week we highlight the good that is going on in the world that is not normally covered by the major news outlets. We'd like to thank our friends from the goodnewsnetwork.org for providing the material for the stories for our broadcast this evening. And now, here's the good news for this week. Our first good news story: Dad attracts diners from across the globe after building a $22,000 Greek taverna in his backyard. How about that? Mr. Patnikos Paniotou, I hope I got that right, is attracting diners from all around the world after the restaurant that he built in his backyard became a local hotspot, forking out tens of thousands of dollars to bring a slice of the Mediterranean to the industrial heartland of England. All the net proceeds from his delicious Greek menu goes to charity. So here's this guy who builds a restaurant in his backyard. It is called the Lakis Greek Taverna, and despite literally sitting in the 44-year-old's yard, it's fully compliant with restaurant regulations. So now they're attracting visitors from as far away as the U.S. and are typically booked 2 months in advance, serving around 200 customers per night. Luckily, the neighbors don't mind, and they are fantastic on both sides, Paniotou explained. We usually do a street lunch for the locals, and they're great, and they love it that we're raising money for local causes. And we get a lot of support from our local area. He said, my father always wanted to run a traditional Greek taverna from his home, and so it's a way of keeping his memory alive and raising much needed money for charity. The restaurant only serves up homemade traditional food prepared by Michelle, his wife, and a volunteer chef who works at a Marriott hotel as a day job. Desserts include a range of homemade traditional Greek delicacies, including baklava, my favorite, coconut cake, and Greek chocolate rock cake called doukissa. He said, I'm a second-generation Greek Cypriot, and my mother migrated here in 1974 with my father. They came here on a working holiday, but they lost their home to the Turkish. And at the start, my mother was the driving force as well. And she started us off with all the recipes and made sure that the food was right. It's completely traditional. How wonderful to keep his father's memory alive by building it right in his backyard. Our next story is Eagle's parents spend year nursing chick who fell out of a tree, forsaking the new nesting season. This is an interesting story. It once seems to be a never before seen phenomena among the species. The white-tailed eagle couple has skipped this year's breeding season in order to care for a juvenile who broke a wing last year. Hatching in April, unseasonably wild weather blew an eaglet from its nest on the Isle of Mull during the July fledgling season. Its mother and father have spent 12 months nursing it back to health, even going as far as skipping the mating season. Members of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds in the UK, United Kingdom, recently recorded a video of the miracle chick in flight, soaring on thermal updrafts without an issue, even though its left wing was disfigured from the fall. RSPB officer David Sexton said that he spotted the juvenile in the springtime. Its mother and father were still bringing it fish, even though it was already almost fully grown. He says he's never seen or heard anything like it before in the eagle world. Sexton says, I've also consulted with other eagle experts at home and abroad, and so far no one else has reported this kind of extended parenting for an injured chick. So before we go to break, here's another interesting story. Hobbyists restore steam locomotive to pristine condition as it puffs down the track for the first time in 44 years. It's easy to be romantic about trains, but typically that does not grow into a hobby, at least for everyone other than Ian Smith from the Scottish Highlands. Smith and a small group of volunteers have spent the last quarter of a century restoring this Class 2 60 engine to working order. And after years of elbow grease and weekend tinkering, they finally got to watch it huff and puff down the tracks again. The train, affectionately known as the Carmelite Pilot, was built 75 years ago, and it spent a majority of its working life carrying passengers in Scotland between Angus and Fife, which is a journey of around 90 minutes. Ian Smith admitted, he says it's a very emotional thing to experience and see it up and running again. A former London Northeast Railway engineer, Ian Fisher, bought the locomotive after getting to know one of the former drivers. So as a retirement gig, the locomotive was added to a railroad museum in Dundee and then sent to another railway where it operated on the Heritage Line. Eventually, though, a problem put it out of action and it returned to Fraser's ownership in 1989. 14 years later, Mr. Fraser died, but in 2000, the volunteer-led Carmelite Pilot Company was formed with the intention of fully restoring the locomotive. Much of the work was done in Scotland, where it sat alongside other heritage locomotives. Receiving a fresh coat of paint according to its original specs, it now lives again, relying upon dozens of parts that were custom made because replacements were impossible to find. It was like a big, gigantic jigsaw puzzle, building it at our site at one time. Next here on The Good News, we will hear from about a billionaire who went ahead and gave $1 billion for free tuition for doctors. And we'll have that story right after this here on the New Thought Media Network.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
The New Thought Men's community proudly presents New Thought Men's Summit, Foundations, an online conference, September 22nd through 27th. Register today at www.newthoughtmens.community, featuring 22 New Thought speakers, ministers, and visionaries, sharing their wisdom of modern spiritual masculinity. New Thought Men's community, empowering wholeness, centered in spiritual living.
And now we're back to the good news here on the New Thought Media Network. Michael Bloomberg donates $1 billion to provide free tuition for future doctors at Johns Hopkins. Interesting. Bloomberg Philanthropic announced on Monday a new $1 billion gift to make medical school free at Johns Hopkins University for a majority of the students, while also increasing financial aid for students at its School of Nursing and also public health. The announcement was made in Michael Bloomberg's annual letter on philanthropy in the Bloomberg Philanthropies 2023-2024 annual report that was released today. Nearly 2/3 of all students that are seeking an MD from Johns Hopkins qualify for financial aid, and future doctors graduate from Hopkins with an average total student debt of around $104,000. Now, beginning in the fall of 2024, Johns Hopkins will offer free tuition for medical students coming from families earning less than $300,000 a year, which represents around 95% of all Americans. On top of tuition, Johns Hopkins will be covering living expenses and fees for students from families who earn less than $175,000 per year. This is the second of two 10-figure donations from Bloomberg to Johns Hopkins, having already contributed a historic $1.8 billion to Johns Hopkins in 2018 to try and ensure that undergrad students are accepted regardless of their family's income, permanently establishing need-blind admissions. So that gift lowered the net cost of attendance, the actual cost that most families pay, by 40%, and has had a transformative impact on the makeup of the Johns Hopkins student body. Last year, the former mayor of New York donated over $3 billion to charity, making him one of the most prolific American philanthropists this year. Not all of the billionaires are shooting rockets up in the sky. Our next story comes from South Korea. Contest winner turns bridge into the longest walking art gallery in South Korea. The Metropolitan Government of Seoul, South Korea has just concluded a contest to redesign the lower deck of a famous city bridge, awarding the first prize to a Dutch firm that wants to turn it into an art gallery and cultural space. Firm Arch Mist provided the most innovative proposal for remodeling the semi-submersible Jamsu pedestrian bridge over the Han River, with their vision of metal ribbons winding beneath the piles of the bridge structures. The design will offer multiple balconies and decks for the hosting of art displays and cultural events without impeding pedestrian flow. Built in 1979, the Jamsu Bridge occasionally floods, but for decades it's also been hosting events including food trucks and also shows, weather permitting. It was eventually arched in the middle to allow for boat traffic to pass underneath, and is now combined with the fountains and light show, promising to be a center of attention in the metropolitan in the in the glittering city of 10 million people. There you go. Next on the good news, picking up litter and getting free stuff in Copenhagen this summer through eco-conscious rewards program. There's never been a better time to plan a summer vacation in Copenhagen. 2024 is set to be the largest tourist season on record, with people flooding to the popular destinations in Italy, France, and Spain, in such numbers that city governments are raising tourist tax and even discouraging visitors with strict controls on behavior, tour group size, and also rental property numbers. By contrast, though, Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark, has launched a program whereby visitors this summer can earn credit for public transport, attraction entrances, and more by picking up litter, using zero emissions transportation, or doing short volunteer stints. Rather than penalizing bad behavior, Copenhagen wants to invite good behavior by installing its visitors to the values and habits that makes Copenhagen one of the most environmentally sustainable European capitals. At the moment, the program, which is called CopenPay, is running on a trial basis for the month of July, and a GPS map of the city with all of the restaurants, services, and attractions that accept these eco credits highlighted with the address, which also includes what you must do to earn them, as available on the website. Now, wouldn't you like to go to a city like that and get credit for picking up trash or doing good things like that? Huh? This is the good news here on your New Thought Media Network. Our next story I found amusing. A mystery group prowls town conducting mischievous kindness. And what they did was they were stealing, restoring, and returning garden gnomes. Mischief reigns in a small Canadian community after a kidnapping left a man's garden vacant of 10 ceramic garden gnomes that resided there. I bet you it was Wayne Baldwin who took them. Kelly Blair, who's a resident in British Columbia, woke up on a late June morning to discover that his garden gnomes had been stolen from his yard. Blair was distressed as he had also lost a canoe several weeks back and now figured that his neighborhood was no longer safe. He had enjoyed the gnomes' company for years and would miss their weathered, beaten down faces. But then On July 3rd, a knock was heard on the back door. Opening it, Blair beheld an mysterious old woman standing stock still, holding out an envelope addressed to the homeowner. Admitting that she could not answer any of Blair's questions, he opened the envelope to discover a paper silhouette of a gnome with the words Gnome Restoration Society written down the middle. The woman, remaining tight-lipped, led Blair to the back of her truck where, arranged neatly in boxes, he saw all of his gnomes smiling back at him from beneath fresh coats of paint. "The gnomes are home," said Blair. "It just totally made my day." The messenger said that the folks wanted to remain anonymous, and apart from that, she had no information to give Blair, who said that he was amazed at the exquisite detail and restoration of those mischief makers that they undertook on behalf of his garden gnomes. The detail is just incredible. And Blair said that he would like to thank all of those involved in the gnome restoration project. And he says, "Thank you so very much for this random act of kindness." Here's a story that touched my heart this week. A 47-year-old finally pursues lifelong passion for architecture in adult degree program to graduate next year. Unfulfilled by his successful career in business, a 47-year-old Nashville man seized an opportunity to finally pursue a lifelong passion after passing it up during his college days in favor of something more practical. Now 47, the gentleman is back on track to graduate in May of 2025 at the age of 48 with a bachelor's of architecture. Who says that you can't go back to school later in life? Nashville native TJ Wilt always had a passion for architecture, dating back to the 6th grade when an inspirational art teacher had the class draw floor plans. But when it came time for college, Wilt pursued the expected path, earning a finance degree from Belmont University in 1999, followed by an MBA, and building a career in business. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, it upended lives and prompted deep self-reflection for many, including Wilt. Faced with personal challenges and dissatisfied with his corporate finance job, the father of 3 teenage boys decided it was time to finally chase his architectural aspirations. Discovering that his alma mater, Belmont, had just launched an architecture program, Wilt jumped at the chance to change his life. The adult degree program provided a 40% tuition discount and also credit for prior coursework. So he dove in headfirst, enrolling in the fall of 2020. He found kinship with a handful of second degree seekers in his class and with other adult learners in his program, like Tess and Kim, who also were making bold career changes in their 30s. Looking ahead, Wilt is expected to explore his love of mid-century modern design and sustainable housing, especially using, of all things, shipping containers. But while he dreams of designing timeless residential projects, his recent studies have also cultivated an appreciation for commercial architecture. He says, "I don't want to build anything that's going to be torn down in the next 10 years. I want something, whatever I build, I want to have people look up and say, oh, that's going to stay there for about 100 years or 200 years or more." So when Wilt dons his cap and gown next spring, he'll be realizing a childhood dream, deferred but never forgotten. And he'll be showing up with his teenage boys and himself and shows that happiness and purpose are always within reach at any stage of life with a little faith and a little hard work. If I can go back and get my master's degree at 57, then anything is possible. We will have next here on the Good News our hero of the week after we take a pause for these messages. And this is the Good News here on your New Thought Media Network. I'm Reverend Michael Mangus, subbing in for the Reverend Dr. Robert Brzezinski. And now it is time for our hero of the week. And here's a story that really touched my heart. This was first reported during another show that I produce called Rockin' the Love, in which they have a good news portion. The world's most popular YouTuber builds 100 homes for South Americans in disaster areas. In a video entitled, "I Built 100 Homes and Gave Them Away," the world's most popular YouTuber continued to demonstrate that his channel is far more than just crazy videos. James Donaldson, also known as Mr. Beast, has, get this, 300 million subscribers, and they tune in to watch him perform all kinds of crazy stunts and in general do crazy things like shredding a $500,000 Lamborghini and hiring a real assassin to try and hunt him down. But the revenues from these wanton acts of viral content goes to more than just filming expenses. Mr. Beast has also spent millions and millions on philanthropic causes, taking his Beast Philanthropy series to Central and South America. The YouTuber has targeted areas where natural disasters have left people homeless. In Jamaica, a family living in a rural mountainous area lost her home in a landslide. They got a brand new modern home, as did other families whose house was flooded every time that there were heavy rains. This is just the latest installment in Mr. Beast's philanthropic activities, some of which go into projects on his sub-channel, which is called Beast Philanthropy. He has also dug wells for villages in Africa. He's helped 1,000 kids and young people get cochlear implants and has held several massive fundraisers for feeding families, constructing solar power stations, and much, much more. Isn't that wonderful? Mr. Beast is our hero of the week here on The Good News, here on your New Thought Media Network. Well, that's all for the good news this week. On behalf of our executive producer, the Reverend Dr. Robert Brzezinski, I'm Reverend Michael Mangus, and I'm encouraging you to go out into the world this week and make some good news. Good night.